Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the September meeting and program of the San Fernando Valley Unit of the League of Women Voters of Greater Los Angeles. I'm Joyce Batten. I'm acting as unit chairman today, and we're glad to have all of you join us. Some of you in the audience may be new to the League, so I'd like to tell you just a little bit about it. Our organization dates back over 100 years when the 90th Amendment to the Constitution was ratified and women were now able to vote. The League is a nonpartisan political organization, encourages informed and active participation in government, works to increase understanding of major public policy issues, and influences public policy through education and advocacy. So that's what we're all about. Our speaker today is our member, Rosemary Enzer. Rosemary has served as state president of the California Federation of Business and Professional Women. She is a retired school administrator and has been active as a CASA, which is a court-appointed special advocate, assisting the Juvenile Dependency Court and children who are in foster care. Those are all in addition to her League activities. Rosemary.
Thank you, Joyce. And thank you all for attending today. I must say I'm a little bit intimidated looking at you all because I see a number of people who've probably done pros and cons many more times than I have for many more years. But I'm going to do my best. The League strives to make every voter an informed voter. And so my goal today is to help to achieve that. So before we talk about each individual ballot measure, I'd like to give you some basic information about propositions. So these are simply proposed laws that are presented to the public for a vote. They can be a new law, they could be a change in an existing law, or they could be an amendment to the California Constitution. They can be placed on the ballot by the legislature, or they can be placed on the ballot by citizens gathering signatures. In other words, they are initiated by citizens and become initiatives. However, usually it's the signatures are gathered by paid people, paid signature gatherers. All of the state measures only require a simple majority to pass, with one exception, and that is school bonds, which require a 2/3 vote. On this ballot in November, there are 7 state measures. There are 3 Los Angeles City measures and 2 LA County measures. I will be talking about the state and county measures only. The information on the city measures is not exactly available yet, not quite. So people often say that they're very confused about how to vote. They say, I don't know what to do because yes means no and no means yes, and I'm just totally confused about what I'm supposed to do with this. So a very simple rule of thumb is this. The ballot measures propose changes. If you like the change that's being proposed, then you vote yes. If you don't like that change, or you don't believe there should be any change at all, then you simply vote no. When you're evaluating propositions, there are several things that you want to look at. You want to think about who's sponsoring it, who's opposing it. Is it well written? If it's not well written, it may end up in the courts. Does it have its own revenue source, or will some other program need to be cut in order to provide the funds that are included in the proposition? Is it really a simple enough yes or no question? And if it's a constitutional amendment, is it something that actually belongs in the California Constitution? You should remember that the arguments that are presented for and against ballot measures are written by partisans. They're not necessarily true or valid. They are simply another form of advertising. So the only statements that you can count on as being truth or factual are those that are presented by the Legislative Analyst's Office. Those are not ads. There are 3 kinds of ballot measures on this particular election. There is a constitutional amendment that was placed on the ballot by the legislature. There are some signature initiatives that were placed by signatures that were gathered. And there's a referendum that will decide whether or not a law that was passed by the legislature will actually go into effect. So what I plan to do today is to tell you the question, the situation as things are now, what this law proposes, any fiscal effect that it might have. I'll tell you who supports and who opposes it and what they say about it. And I will tell you who the major contributors are and how much money they have contributed so far. So I'll take questions after each of the ballot measures. We'll ask you to raise your hand, and Joyce Batten will call on you. She will recognize you. The reason the chat is turned off is our voter service chair, Fran Lapidis, pointed out that it prevents anyone from posting some partisan comment in the chat function. So that's why it's turned off today. So if you want to talk to send a message to your buddy, you'll just have to text them or wait till after we're done. So I'm going to begin with two propositions that you might have heard something about. You probably know a little bit about 26 and 27 because they're on television every 5 minutes at least. These are two propositions that deal with gambling, and they both include sports betting in California. 26 deals mostly with gaming in tribal casinos and at horse race tracks. Proposition 27 deals with sports betting online with mobile devices. They are both limit sports wagering to age 21 and above, and they both have new regulations to enforce them. So the situation now is that a few years ago, until a few years ago, sports betting was illegal in every state except for Nevada. The Supreme Court overturned that law, and since then, sports gambling, sports wagers have been made legal in 30-something states. The California Constitution generally prohibits all forms of gambling. However, we have amended it over the last few years to allow some forms. For example, we have the California Lottery, we have card rooms, we have horse racing, and we have some forms of gambling in the American Indian-owned casinos. But basically still, Nevada-style gambling and sports betting are not legal in California. Now, that's not to say that there isn't sports betting going on all the time. It's just not legal here. Under federal law, the Indian tribes are sovereign nations. And so the rules that govern their casinos are set with individual agreements called compacts that are between the owners of the casinos, the Indian tribes, and the state. So if both of these propositions were to pass, they would both take effect, unless a court finds that there is a conflict between the two, which is pretty likely, I think. And in that case, the ballot measure that has the most votes will become law. So we'll look at 26 first. 26 asks two questions. The first one is, should California increase the allowable gambling activities at Indian casinos? And second, should California allow betting on sports events at casinos and at horse race tracks? The proposal for Proposition 26 is that it would allow casinos to have roulette and dice games like craps. Now, that may sound a little confusing because we've probably all seen commercials where people appear to be shooting craps in Indian casinos. But this is really a different form of gambling than the Las Vegas style gambling. It uses cards, not dice. So Proposition 26 would allow Las Vegas style roulette and other dice games like craps. It would also allow the casinos, the Indian casinos, and 4 horse race tracks to offer betting on site on sports events. No betting would be allowed on any high school sports, and it would all wagers must be placed on site, either in a casino or at a racetrack. And again, you would have to be 21 years old or older. There would be a 10% net tax on sports betting at the racetrack, with the money going into a new fund. The tax revenue from this, 70% would go into the general fund, 15% would go into enforcement and regulation, and the last 15% would be for gambling addiction and mental health programs. And there would be new enforcement procedures to prevent illegal gambling. So the fiscal effect of Proposition 26 is really difficult to predict, because we don't know what the terms of agreements will be between the casinos and the Indian tribes who run the casinos in the state. We don't know how much people will bet, or how many people will take advantage of betting on sports or using these new games. There is an estimate that it could increase state revenues by tens of millions of dollars annually. However, some of that will be offset by the increased cost for enforcement and regulation. So a word about the card rooms. The card rooms are located primarily in very small cities, and they provide revenue for local governments. So we don't know whether or not the bettors that patronize these card rooms would shift their businesses to casinos where there are more options, or whether they would continue to only play in the card rooms. That could affect the revenue that comes to our local governments. So what do the supporters of this say? Well, they say that it will continue to support American Indian economies by allowing closely regulated gaming. They say it is a very responsible way to regulate sports betting, which is already happening, and to promote Indian self-reliance. They say that the Indian casinos benefit California through bringing in revenue and jobs. But the opponents say that Proposition 26 will massively expand gambling, and it will mostly benefit the very large Indian casinos. They say that it lacks any kind of protection for the casino workers, nothing involving safety or wages or harassment or discrimination and so forth. The opponents also say that this could just bury the card rooms and thus decrease essential revenue to local governments. And finally, they say that expanding gambling at racetracks is a way to save an industry that is currently injuring a lot of horses. So let's look at who the supporters are. Well, there are several Indian tribes that are supporting this. The NAACP, the Service Employees Union, the Lieutenant Governor and the State Treasurer of California are supporting it. It is opposed by the SPCA because of the injuries to horses at racetracks. It's opposed by the American Federation of State, County, and Municipal Employees, and by the California Senior Advocates League. Now, you can guess that there's a lot of money that's been contributed because of all the ads that you've seen on TV, and it is a staggering amount. So far, the contributions in support of Proposition 26 total over $118 million. The opponents have contributed total of about $45,500,000. These numbers are as of Monday. They may have changed a little since then. The major contributors in support of Proposition 26 are several Indian tribes. The Federated Indians of Grattan Rancheria are the largest contributors with over 31 million, almost $32 million. Pachanga and Yocha Dihi Winton Nation, Agua Caliente and Verona Band of Mission Indians are all supporters that have donated over in the tens of millions of dollars. Proposition 26 is opposed by United Ventures, LLC, and Park West Casinos, which have each contributed $2,250,000, and PT Gaming, the Bicycle Casino, and the Hollywood Park Casino, which have each contributed 500,000. These last, all of these opponents are basically the operators of card rooms. So a yes vote on Proposition 26 means that you want to allow the Indian casinos to have roulette and dice games like craps, and you want to allow sports betting in casinos and at certain horse race tracks. A no vote means that you do not want the Indian casinos to add any of these kinds of gambling. So I think we'll go on to 27 and then take questions on both of those. So 27 also allows sports wagering, but in this instance, it is only allowed online. Right now, as we mentioned, betting on sports events in California is not legal, although other kinds of wagers are. This ballot measure proposes that online betting would be allowed on adult sports, no high school sports betting, and you don't need to be in a casino. You can vote anywhere you have a cell phone or an iPad or any kind of mobile device. You can place your bet. It also allows betting on other kinds of competitions like award shows and current events, but it prohibits betting on elections. It allows the Indian tribes to offer sports betting under their own name and their own branding. They must pay a one-time $10 million licensing fee to the state and a renewal fee every 5 years. Or it also allows gaming companies to offer online sports betting if they sign an agreement with an Indian tribe and pay a $100 million licensing fee with the renewal fee every 5 years. There would be a new division in the Justice Department that would regulate all of this. And a 10% tax on all companies or all tribes that are offering sports betting. So the revenue after all of these regulatory costs would go into a new fund. 85% of it would be for homelessness and related mental health programs. 15% would go to the tribes that are not currently involved in gambling. So the fiscal effects, like with Proposition 26, are really difficult to determine because it depends on how many entities will offer betting, how many tribes will sign a compact with a company, or how many will offer their own form under their own branding. It depends on how these compacts are renegotiated, and it depends on the number of people who decide to wager online. There is a potential increase in state revenues that is estimated to be up to $500 million a year, but the regulatory costs could be in the tens of millions, some of that offset by the licensing fees. There could be increased costs for assistance to people who have a gambling addiction, because this may encourage more gamblers. We don't know, and there's no cost estimate on that. So I think you're probably familiar with what the supporters say. They say that this is going to provide hundreds of millions of dollars for homelessness and mental health and addiction. And they say that it's going to benefit every tribe, including those that do not have large casinos. They also say that the technology is available to make sure that minors do not place votes. The opponents say this is a very deceptive measure that's been promoted by out-of-state companies to legalize online gambling. They say it's not a solution to homelessness. It's only going to open more people to addiction to gambling, and perhaps because of that, increase homelessness. They also point out that it doesn't generate jobs or create investment in the state, because the betting operators will retain most of the profits. It is supported by several Indian tribes that do not operate casinos. It's supported by Major League Baseball and by several groups that deal with homelessness. For example, the San Diego Regional Task Force on Homelessness. It's opposed by the Tribal Alliance of Sovereign Indian Nations, the California Nations Indian Gaming Association, and both the California Republican and Democratic parties. And again, millions of dollars have been donated already. $157 million plus in support of Proposition 27, and over $184 million in opposition to Proposition 27. The supporters are FanDuel, which is a company that has contributed over $5 million, $31 million. DraftKings, Penn National Gaming, FBG Enterprises, and BetMGM. Those four companies have all contributed in excess of $25 million. And I just want to point out that these are all companies that operate online gaming. And with the exception of FanDuel, they are all located outside California. FanDuel is the only California company. Proposition 27 is opposed by a number of Indian tribes that operate casinos, like the San Manuel Band. They have contributed 53 million plus. The Rincon Band, the Pala Casino Resort, and others have contributed substantial amounts in opposition to Proposition 27. So a yes vote on 27 means that you want to legalize online and mobile sports betting. A no vote means that you do not want online and mobile sports betting to be legal in California. So do we have any questions? Okay, I see Susanna's hand is up. Go ahead, Susanna.
Thank you. Thank you. I couldn't find the raised hand. Am I correct in understanding that in each of these, 10% is the amount that is then subdivided in 85, 15, 15, or whatever, which is to say,
it's a 10% tax.
in
Yes.
each case, it's a 10% tax that is then divvied up into the percentages that you gave us. Is that correct? Okay. All right. So it's a very small amount.
It is.
That's then being divided. Of course, they're going to. Okay. Anyhow, thank you.
Sue, I see your hand up.
Does the league have a position on either of these propositions?
No, the league does not have a position because the league only takes positions on issues that we have studied, and we've never studied gambling.
Thank you.
No position. Any other questions? Oh, yes, Joyce.
No, I was just
Oh, you have your
trying to find what that
David.
appears on my screen. Go ahead.
David, did you have a question?
Yeah, I thought the tradition, first of all, was not to answer the question during a ballot measures presentation about whether the league has a position. But that's not my question.
Well, I can't tell you what the position is. We can answer whether or not they have a position, but we can't tell you what the position is.
That's it.
So that's the distinction.
I got it. That's a good distinction.
Sure.
So I got a question on 26. The official quick reference guide says that people and entities would have a new way to seek enforcement of certain state gambling laws. Can you detail that for us, please?
No, I really can't.
Okay.
I know that there will be one established through the Department of Justice, but I really don't know the details on it. But there will be a new enforcement agency that will be a part of the Department of Justice, and there are funds that are designated for enforcement and regulation.
Okay. I think it means there's some sort of private enforcement that could be done. So it also says that you have to be on a non-tribal land in California to bet over the internet. How can they tell where you are? I mean, and how can they enforce that?
I have no idea. I don't know what this technology is that prevents minors from betting online either.
Okay, that's 27 too.
Yeah.
So new ways to reduce it. Yeah. Okay. All right, I'm just, I'm a lawyer and, people bring lawsuits because
Yeah.
just kind of
Again,
interested in
again,
enforcement mechanisms.
what the supporters say and what the opponents say, we have to assume it may or may not be factual.
Mhm. Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Any other questions?
I have a question.
Yes.
Are they, what happens if they both
If they both pass,
win it? Are they in conflict with each other in some way?
if they both win, they both are passed, they would both go into effect unless the court finds that some parts are in conflict. If that happens, then the one that receives the most votes will become law.
You said that. Okay. Okay.
Okay, any other questions? Bob, I believe, has a question.
Thank you very much. It was an excellent presentation. You mentioned a couple of times, however, that what the proponents or opponents say is not necessarily factual. In the ballot pamphlet, it is, because their arguments can be challenged in court. And if they're false or misleading, they will be taken out of the ballot pamphlet. So the ballot pamphlet, you can mislead people maybe, but you can't make false statements if they're challenged.
Thank you for clarifying that. Thank you very much. Marilyn?
Okay, I'm unmuted. Okay, I don't know anything. I'm a Southern Californian, born and raised at Western and Melrose in Hollywood, and I don't know anything about this stuff. And I'm looking it up and I'm researching it, and I understand why you guys haven't. But it feels to me like they're just really trying to increase the things that can be gambled. And that's roulette and dice, and that's sports betting. Sports betting is huge. I mean, it is huge. It would probably double their revenue. But I'm curious. I think there's over 300,000 tribes in California, and only 80 have casinos. Does this make sense? Are the tribes tiny?
Well, I don't believe there are that many, but yes, there certainly is some conflict between those that have casinos and those that don't. I mean, you've seen that on the television ads for sure.
Yeah. How many Native American? Huh. Okay. I got some work. I got some homework to do. I like that.
There's some more research to do. Anne?
Yeah, I had a question just about the sort of the length and the depth of the, the actual measure itself. Sometimes these propositions can be so lengthy and confused that it's really hard to understand all of the impacts. And I was wondering if you could tell just very briefly about both of them in terms of how long they are and how much we might have to read to understand them.
Well, the basic question is what I read to you. That is the basic question. It's on the ballot. Some of them are lengthier than others, certainly. But I basically told you exactly what is included in it. So,
Right. Okay,
Marilyn,
thank you.
you're welcome. Marilyn, did you have another question?
Yeah, just doing my homework already. There are 179.
Okay.
Okay, that's much more normal.
Yeah.
No,
Thank you.
I'm sorry, and that's wrong too. 109 tribes, 73 casinos owned by tribes. Okay.
Right. Okay. Thank you for that information.
I have a question.
Dory?
Yeah, hi. I have a couple of questions. Well, one is how would the Indian tribes, or who decides how to split up the money with the casinos on the tribes that have casinos versus the tribes that don't have any casinos? That's one question. And then I have another.
The Indian tribes that own casinos have to reach an agreement with the state. They have to sign an agreement with the state called a compact.
So then they would say like the X number of tribes that don't have casinos will get the money by.
Well, 15% of, with Proposition 27, 15% of it, or 26, 15% would go to the tribes that do not have
Oh,
casinos.
okay.
Okay, let's move on to, Dory, sorry, Marilyn, did you have one more question?
Oh, no, I forgot to take my hand out.
All right, well, let's move on. I'm sorry. Anybody else? All right. Let's move on to Proposition 1, which is a constitutional amendment. It was placed on the ballot by a 2/3 vote of both houses of the legislature. The question that it asks is, should the California Constitution expressly provide that the state of California shall not deny or interfere with an individual's reproductive freedom, including the right to have an abortion and the right to choose or refuse contraceptives? So as you know, Roe v. Wade was a decision in 1973 that made abortion legal. And after that, states continued to make laws that defined Roe or limited the right to abortions. And recently, then we had the Dobbs decision, which overturned Roe v. Wade. And we also had a statement by Justice Thomas that he feels that federal protection of other personal rights like contraception should be looked into. So this has caused a big concern for many people throughout the country, and in California, the legislature decided to do something about it. The existing California law provides that among all of our rights is the right to privacy, and the court has extended the right to privacy to include an individual's personal reproductive decisions. So because of this concern of what could happen in the future, if we had a different court in California, there's a concern that perhaps a different court might decide to overturn our existing laws and eliminate reproductive choice. So both houses of the California legislature voted to place this constitutional amendment on the ballot and put it before the voters. If it passes, this amendment would go into effect in the California Constitution the day after the election. There's no direct fiscal effectiveness. It has no money involved with it. The supporters are saying that this is going to enshrine the fundamental right to abortion and to contraception in our Constitution. They point out that doctors and nurses and healthcare providers all agree that we should keep reproductive medical decisions with individuals and their healthcare providers, that they should be based on scientific facts and not on political arguments. The opponents say that there's no need for this because California law already has the right to choose, and the Supreme Court ruling did not change that at all. Therefore, Proposition 1 is just not needed. They say that it's an extreme and costly proposal that actually punishes taxpayers, and that we could have abortion seekers from other states just swamping our resources. And so therefore, it's unnecessary. Proposition 1 is supported by the California Medical Association, by Planned Parenthood, and the California Nurses Association. It is opposed by the California Catholic Conference, GYN, Dr. Anne Marie Adams, and Assembly Member Jim Patterson. So far, the contributions supporting Proposition 1 are about $2,625,000. There are no reported contributions in opposition yet. There probably will be, but as of Monday, there were none. The main supporters are M. Quinn Delaney. She's a social activist from Northern California. Planned Parenthood and the Planned Parenthood affiliates of California. They have each donated $500,000. And it is also supported by the California Federation of Teachers, the California Teachers Association, and the ACLU of Northern California. Those three organizations have each donated in excess of $250,000. So a yes vote means that you want to add the right to abortion and to contraceptives to the California Constitution. A no vote just simply means you want to leave the Constitution as it is. So, do we have any questions? Rita.
There we go. Thanks, Rosemary. I'm not sure you have the answer to this question, but assuming it passes, but the legislation just introduced by Senator Graham in the Senate also passes, which would limit abortion past 15 weeks. Would that law supersede the California Constitution on this, or would it become a court case?
I'm going to ask David to answer that question for me.
I was going to ask something about that. Well, they could send federal agents in to enforce the federal law. I don't necessarily think a provision in the state constitution would block it, unless somebody goes and says, well, look, Justice Alito said when he, in the opinion, I think it was Alito who said in the opinion overturning Roe versus Wade, the Dobbs opinion, that, we should let this be decided by the voters. And I think by that he meant in every individual state, not the federal government. So, the feds are allowed to enforce a lot of laws that are allowed to make things illegal that are legal under state law, like technically medical marijuana and all the marijuana stuff is actually illegal under federal law. There's a really bad case on that they'd have to overturn. A friend of mine was involved with that.
So whether it's in the Constitution or not, it doesn't matter if it's just,
the state constitution, in this case, it wouldn't be an independent source of a law that settles the issue. The federal law generally is considered to preempt, and that's because it affects interstate commerce. If you could argue that, this is the key point. It's a commerce clause of the Constitution issue. If you can argue that, and I hope to do this, that abortions provided in California for no money aren't affecting a market for abortion that the feds are trying to eliminate. You might be able to keep abortion, throughout the term legal in California. You might have to leave that only to California residents, because somebody might say that, well, somebody travels across straight lines to take advantage of California's laws. It's a complicated that's bad. But anyway, it's a complicated issue.
Thanks.
Thank you. Bob, did you want to comment on that?
It's my view that the federal law would preempt, just as a federal law that said you cannot ban abortions, and that's being promoted by the Democrats, would prevail over laws in Mississippi and Texas. And I assume most people here would want that to happen. But if a federal law passed saying that abortions are illegal, then it preempts California law.
Yeah, I think that law would be unconstitutional.
Thank you. Susanna, you had a question?
I do. Very simple. A constitutional amendment only needs a majority vote. It doesn't need, I know you said that it was the only case.
That's correct. Yes, only a simple majority.
It doesn't need more than that. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Let's move on to Proposition 28. This is funding for the arts and music education in public schools. The question is, should the state provide specific funding for arts and music education in public schools in an amount higher than the existing constitutional minimum that has been established already for public education? So the situation is that in 1988, we passed Proposition 98, and that guaranteed that a minimum percentage of the state's budget would be spent on education for kindergarten through community college. And that amount is calculated annually every year. It usually runs somewhere around 40%, but there's no guaranteed source for the arts. even though we have requirements to offer education in the arts and in music. So the schools in the low-income areas are usually the most affected by this, because in higher income areas, quite often parents will provide additional funds for art and music. It's not unusual for a parent group to buy the services of a music teacher or an art teacher for a specific school. So what this Proposition 28 would do, it would require the state to set aside part of the general fund to pay for arts and music education in grades K through 12. Now, arts and music education includes not just the visual arts, but it also includes things like dance and theater and graphic arts and so forth. This funding would be in addition to the funding that is already guaranteed by Proposition 98, and it would have to be an amount at least 1% of the prior year's Prop 98 funding. So 1% of whatever was guaranteed for all of education, 1% above that must go to arts and music. In the larger schools, 80% of this would be used for new staff, with 20% for training and supplies. And there would be more funding provided for students from low-income families. The school principals would be in charge of developing programs, and the use of the funds, of course, would need to be reported. The estimate on the fiscal effect of this is that it could cost somewhere between $800 million and $1 billion annually, which sounds like a huge amount of money, but that is actually less than 1/2% of the state's general fund. So our supporters say that this increases funds without raising taxes, that it's really needed because only 1 in 5 schools has a dedicated teacher for arts or music, and that art and music education can improve a student's personal and academic life. That there are many favorable outcomes from motivation to behavioral changes to improve mental health. There were no arguments submitted by the opponents of this proposition. It is supported by the California Teachers Association, the PTA, Los Angeles Unified School District. There is no organized campaign committee opposing it. About $9 million has been contributed in support of it, with the largest donor being Austin Buettner, who was the former superintendent of the Los Angeles Unified School District, and the person really responsible for placing this on the ballot. His support is about over $4 million at this point. So as I said, there was no opposition arguments or money reported. So a yes just means that you want to require that the state specifically provide funding for arts and music education in our public schools. And a no means that you do not want specific funding for arts and music. You want to just keep the funding that we have now. So any questions? It's pretty cut and dried. Carol.
Rosemary, I just have a comment, and your presentation is fabulous of everything. It's rare that the Daily News and the LA Times agree, and the Daily News, a rather conservative news group, strongly supports this. So it's nice to see some agreement once in a while.
Yes, the LA Times supports it. I will mention that the LA Times always warns about ballot box budgeting, but they did strongly support this. So that was interesting. So Proposition 29 is another one that sounds real familiar to all of us because it is about dialysis clinics. And the reason it probably sounds so familiar is because it's the 3rd time we've seen it on the ballot. The question is, should outpatient dialysis clinics be required to have a physician, a nurse practitioner, or a physician's assistant on site at all hours when patients are being treated? And should the clinics be required to provide various information to patients and to the state? So the situation is, this is the 3rd time that this has been placed on the ballot. It is very similar to the last one, which was in 2020. In California, we have about 80,000 patients that receive dialysis treatments at these clinics. Most of them operate 6 days a week and extended hours to accommodate patients that are working or have to travel long distances. There is a requirement that they must have a medical director who is a physician, and there's a requirement that their own physician must visit the patient at least one time a month. And they are also required to report any kind of infections that result from treatment. Most of the patients have Medicare or Medi-Cal or both, although some do have private insurance. 77% of the clinics that operate in California are owned by and operated by two companies, DaVita, which is a Colorado company, and Fresenius Medical Care, which is a German company. The rest of them are operated by smaller nonprofit or for-profit organizations. So the proposal is that these licensed medical practitioners would be required to be on site whenever patients are receiving care. However, if there's a shortage and the clinic is unable to hire one of these medical professionals, they can use telehealth for 1 year. The patients must get a list of any physicians that have more than a 5% interest in the clinic. And the clinics cannot discriminate based on the patient's source of payment. Mostly that concerns patients who are on Medi-Cal. They cannot discriminate because of that. And as required already, they must report any information about infections, and they must obtain permission from the state in order to reduce their hours or to close the clinic. The fiscal effect of this is that it would cost the clinics hundreds of thousands of dollars in salaries to provide a medical professional anytime that patients are there. It means that clinics could close and patients might have to receive care at a more costly place like an emergency room or hospital. So the supporters say this is simply common sense and safety, that we should have a medical professional there. They say that fewer inspections will be necessary. And they say that the big corporations that own these clinics can't afford to pay those salaries. The opponents are saying that more oversight is really unnecessary because there are highly trained technicians that provide care for these patients, and it's not necessary to have any higher level of care. That it would simply take skilled staff away from hospitals, and that the costs involved in this would force clinics to reduce their hours or to close. This is supported by some dialysis patients and some former patients. It is opposed by the American Medical Association, the American Nurses Association, and it's also opposed by some dialysis patients. There has been no money contributed in opposition to this. However, the supporters have contributed $86,333,000. And these supporters include DaVita, 52,700,000, and Fresenius Medical Care, 27,322,000, and then smaller amounts from U.S. Renal Care, Satellite Healthcare, and Dialysis Clinic, Inc. These are all companies that operate clinics, and with the exception of Satellite Healthcare, they are all companies that are outside California. Satellite Healthcare is based in California. So that is Proposition 29. Any questions? I think we're also familiar with it because we've voted on it 3 times. So let's move on to Proposition 30. Proposition 30 has to do with electric cars and wildfires and—
I'm sorry, Dory had a question, and I just want to remind everybody that the raised hand button is now under reactions at the bottom of the screen.
Uh-huh.
All right,
Okay.
Dory, sorry.
Yeah,
Okay,
thank you.
go ahead,
I'm sorry.
Dory.
You mentioned that the companies that are you saying the companies that are supporting it Are, or are those the corporations that are opposed? I'm sorry, I didn't hear very well.
These are the supporters of it.
Who support this?
Yes.
Oh, okay. And another, when it says a doctor, nurse, or PA, do all three have to be there, or it's
No,
just
no,
one?
they could hire either a licensed medical physician, a physician's assistant, or a nurse practitioner.
Okay,
Any of the three.
okay.
No,
thank
not
you.
all three, just one.
Rosemary, I
Yes.
think you have it, I think you have it twisted.
Yeah, those were the opponents. I'm sorry, those were the opponents.
The
not-
opposition.
Thank you.
the
I
big
just realized
support-
what I said.
Yeah, the big supporter, according to the newspapers, is the union, the
Is the union. I'm sorry.
SEIU.
SEIU is a supporter.
The
I'm sorry.
SEIU, they're doing it for harassment, according to the LA Times.
You're absolutely right. Those are the companies that operate these clinics are the opponents, and they're the ones who
Right.
have donated all the money. Thank you. Okay, so Proposition 30, as I said, it has to do with electric cars and wildfires and millionaires. The question is, should the tax rate on personal income above $2 million be increased by 1.75%, and the resulting revenue be dedicated to zero emission vehicle subsidies and zero emission vehicle infrastructure like charging stations and wildfire suppression and prevention programs. To make it easier from now on, I'm not going to say zero emission vehicles or ZEVs. I'm just going to say electric cars, because even though there are hydrogen powered cars, we are mostly really talking about electric vehicles. So we know we have a drought, we know we have increasing wildfires, and we know we have poor air quality. Gas-powered cars and wildfire smoke are the largest source of greenhouse gas emissions in California. And the state has implemented programs for a reduction of these, but they still persist. So we know electric cars are very costly, and there is a lack of charging stations to support them as we continue to increase in numbers of electric cars. The Forestry Service and CAL FIRE are facing rising costs because fires are more frequent and more catastrophic. In fact, this year's budget for wildfires is approximately $4 billion. The Air Resources Board has proposed a regulation that would require 35% of new cars sold in California to be electric by 2026 and 100% to be electric by 2035. The rideshare companies like Lyft and Uber would be required to have 90% of their drivers in electric cars by 2030. So we know the electrical grid is going to have upgrades in order to handle this increase. And right now the state has approximately $10 billion allocated over 5 years to increase the number of electric cars in the state. So this is a proposal that would increase the income tax on the highest income individuals, would increase their income tax, their personal income tax by 1.75%. And these new funds would be used 45% to promote the purchase of electric cars through subsidies and rebates. 35% would be used for infrastructure for electric cars, and 20% would be used for wildfire suppression and prevention. At least half of the funding would be for low income and disadvantaged communities, and the training and hiring of firefighters would be a priority. So the fiscal effects, it's estimated that this would generate taxes in an amount of 3.5 to 5 billion a year, most years. There is currently a 1% tax on individuals who have an income of 1 million and over that goes for mental health programs. So this adding that, this new tax and that, it would bring the tax rate to 15.05% for each dollar above $2 million in income, which would be higher than any other state. The supporters say that this is going to reduce wildfires and air pollution. And they point out that taxes only 0.2% of Californians, the wealthiest, who can afford to pay their fair share to reduce pollution. They say that it's going to make electric vehicles more affordable and it's going to create well-paying green jobs. The opponents say that we already have very high taxes in California and we already have high inflation, that there are sufficient funds already allocated for zero emission vehicles and for fire suppression. And if we need more money, it could come from the budget surplus, which California currently does have. And the opponents also say that there's no guarantee that it would make electric cars more affordable. The largest donor in support of this is Lyft, the rideshare company. They've donated 15 million of the 16 million that has currently been donated by supporters. The opponents have donated 2,433,000, and there are 6 names of individuals that are listed as opponents. I Googled them, but I really didn't get much information about who they are, but I'll give you their names. They're Mark Heising, Bruce Dunleavy, Leonard G. Baker Jr., William Younger Jr., Richard and Mary Jo Kovacevic, and they have donated amounts from 151,000, almost 152,000 to 500,000 each. So as I said, I'm not sure exactly who they are, but I'm guessing that they might be on the list to have an income tax increase. So that's all I can tell you about the opponents. So a yes vote means that you want to increase the income tax for individuals with an income over 2 million by 1.75% and use that revenue to increase the number of zero emission vehicles and for wildfire prevention and suppression. A no vote means that you want the income tax rate to remain the same. So any questions?
I just want to point out that under the reactions icon, if you press the thumbs up, that's how you get recognized for questions.
Yeah. Neil.
Yeah, I'm sorry, what did you say the estimated revenue by increasing that 1.75% would be?
It's estimated to be between 3.5 and $5 billion each year.
What was that, billion or million?
Billion with a B.
Thank you.
Joyce, no, Rita had your hand up.
Rita, did you have a question?
But I'm, okay, there we go. I was on mute.
She's unmuted.
Okay. In that this type of legislation would affect environment, government operations, and the government's and taxation, does the league have a position on this?
I don't believe the league has taken a position on this.
Thanks.
Sue?
Sue?
Yes, is any of the expected revenue designated for educating students in California?
No, it is all for wildfire suppression and prevention and for zero emission vehicles and infrastructure.
Thank you.
David?
I have 2 questions really. One's just to follow up on Rita's. It's been a while since I read the definition of ballot box budgeting. Now, this proposition would provide new funds, but mandate they be spent in a certain way. It wouldn't take funds out of the existing budget.
Correct.
Does it still count? Would this one fit the definition of ballot box budgeting, or is this something different?
Well, I suppose it would, because I think anytime that we put budgeting in the hands of the people rather than the legislature, I guess that would be ballot box budgeting.
Okay, my only question.
That's my personal opinion. I don't know.
Okay, I don't know either. My other question, I saw a commercial with Gavin Newsom against this and, you know, calling out Lyft, but I really don't know what their grievances or support come from. But do you know what their interests are?
Well, Lyft's interest is that their concern is that they're going to be required to have only electrical vehicles in a very few years. So that's their concern.
So this would subsidize.
So they would like to see subsidies and rebates for the purchase of electric cars.
And do you know why Newsom is opposed?
I do not.
Okay, thanks.
Bob,
Bob?
did
Yeah.
you have a question?
Well, my comment was on Newsom, because I think it's very important to point out that Newsom is against it. He would be the most important opponent. And he's running commercials now against it. So there'll be some money against it as well.
Right. There will be money, I'm sure, very soon. Okay. David, did you have another question? Your hand's still up. Okay. All right. We have one more state proposition.
Susanna has her hand up.
Susanna, I'm sorry.
That's okay. I know you've got two screens. It's hard. Mine's very quick and easy. I'm afraid I missed if you said if this is a legislative or if it comes from the legislature or if it's an initiative by a group.
It's an initiative that was put on the ballot through signatures.
Okay, and do we know the group behind? Would it be the supporters that you listed? Or
Well, I think, yeah, the major supporter was is Lyft.
Okay, so Lyft is probably okay.
Yeah, it's also supported by the International Brotherhood of Electric Workers, PAC, the Zinc Collective, and the California Association of Electrical Workers, and the California Environmental Voters.
Okay, thank you.
Oh, sorry about that big truck.
Another question, Lorraine?
Am I allowed to comment on it, or can I, or only questions? No comments? Okay, fine, thank you.
Lorraine?
Yeah, I'm sorry. I had a comment, not a question, but I guess we're not allowed to comment. Okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
We're going to move on to the last of the state measures, which is Proposition 31. This is a referendum. This is a proposition that is asking that a law that was passed by the legislature and signed by the governor go to the voters for approval. Any person or entity in California that disagrees with a law that's been passed has 90 days to circulate a petition asking for a referendum on the law. And the law then cannot be enforced until an election is held. So this is a little confusing because most of the time when a group puts something on the ballot, they want you to vote yes on it. But in this case, they want you to, the group who put it on the ballot want you to vote no because you're voting on the law that they disagree with. So this law was passed in 2020. It was SB 793, and it prohibits stores and vending machines from selling most flavored tobacco products, including vaping products, flavored chewing tobacco, menthol cigarettes, and flavored cigarillos. It excludes hookah and premium cigars. So the proposal is that a yes vote means that stores and vending machines could not sell these tobacco products, flavored tobacco products, and there would be a $250 penalty for each violation. The penalty would be paid by the owners, not by the purchasers of these products. It would be paid by the owners of the stores that sell them. A no vote on this means that 793 would be repealed and that these products would continue to be legally sold in California. So the fiscal effects have to do with the tobacco taxes, which in California are used for healthcare, including Medi-Cal, They're also used for early childhood development and tobacco control efforts. So it's estimated that there could be a decrease in revenue of $100 million annually, depending on whether or not people buy other tobacco products or whether they just stop using any tobacco products at all. And we don't know. We don't know if they will just switch to other unflavored tobacco or whether this would encourage some people to stop using tobacco. So the net change in this is just really very difficult. The revenue loss could be somewhere in the tens of $millions to $100 million a year. There is a possibility that it could create less healthcare costs, but again, the net change is really uncertain. The supporters say that this is going to help decrease smoking rates, especially among young people, that it will protect young people by ending the sale of these candy flavored products that cause them to go on to addiction to other types of tobacco. And they say that it prevents big tobacco from causing more harm to minority communities that buy a lot of menthol flavored products. The opponents say that this law is unfair because it exempts expensive cigars and hookah and flavored pipe tobacco. They say that it's going to hurt small businesses. And they say that even though youth should not have access to tobacco products, it prohibits the sale of products that millions of adults choose to use legally. This proposition or this referendum is supported by the California Medical Association, the Heart Association, American Cancer Society. It's opposed by the California Hispanic and Cal Asian Chambers of Commerce and by the California Taxpayer Protection Committee. The major financial contributors in support of this are Michael Bloomberg. Now you've heard of him. He's contributed over $4 million. The Kaiser Foundation Health Plan has contributed $1.1 million. And there are significant contributions from the Cancer Society, the Heart Association, and the California Teachers Association. $22,600,000 has been contributed in opposition to this. And those the two contributors are the R.J. Reynolds Tobacco Company, which has contributed $11 million, and the Philip Morris Company, which has contributed $10,600,000. So that's the total that has been donated in opposition. So, excuse me, again, a yes vote means that you want SB 93 to become a law and therefore ban the sale of most flavored tobacco products. A no vote means that you want to repeal this legislation and keep the sale of flavored tobacco products legal in California. So, questions? Yes, Susanna.
You're muted.
She's unmuting.
Right. Sorry. I'm afraid that this is a case where, because it's a referendum against something that's already there, the pro and con part is gotten me muddled. R.J. Reynolds and the other one are in favor of this referendum. They want people to
vote no.
They want people to vote no. And so they are considered to be.
I'm sorry. Yeah, I'm sorry.
I mean, are they the people who see it's awful? Because I mean, it's clear R.J. Reynolds wants you to say no to. They want you to say
they want to keep these products legal. So
right,
they want you to vote no on the law.
And so no on the law, yes on the referendum. But what people would vote would be yes on the referendum or no on the referendum. See, I mean, I haven't seen the wording, but I feel like you were
okay. So, all right, I'll just read the wording again very quickly.
Yes, thank you. I'm sorry. I mean, I know what
read it very quickly.
Parsing it out really carefully so that we don't accidentally vote the wrong way.
Yeah. this proposition is asking that a law passed by the legislature and signed by the governor go to the voters for approval. Where am I? Let's see. A yes vote means that stores and vending machines could not sell flavored tobacco products, and there would be a penalty for each violation. A no vote means that the law would be repealed and these products would continue to be sold legally.
Okay, because I understood a referendum. I mean, I guess.
Well, it's asking, do you want this law to go into effect?
And I would say, yes, I do.
If you don't want flavored tobacco products.
And I, for example, if I didn't want, I
want the law to go into effect.
Right.
If you want those products to remain legal, you would vote, no, I don't want this law to go into effect.
This is all because of the way the referendum is worded.
It's very confusing. It really is.
Yeah, okay. Okay. Thank you. I mean, it's one of those ones that one is just going to have to really pay attention.
Yeah. Okay. Last night at 8:30, I received information on the 2 county propositions, 2 ballot measures, and it's very sketchy information. I don't have the supporters or the opponents or the amount of money, but I can at least tell you what's contained in these 2 ballot measures. You will have to forgive me, but I'll have to read most of it to you because, as I said, I got it at 8:30 last night, so I haven't studied it sufficiently. But there are 2 county measures. The first one is a charter amendment, Measure A, and this is to provide the authority to remove a sheriff for cause. This measure seeks to promote accountability for the sheriff's department by establishing a protocol for the Board of Supervisors to remove the elected sheriff for violations that are related to the performance of his duties. Under the current protocol, removing a sheriff occurs either by convening a grand jury or holding a recall election. This amendment would expedite it by allowing the Board of Supervisors to remove a sheriff with a 4/5 vote. The supervisors would have to establish sufficient grounds, and the legitimate causes include, but are not limited to, violations of a law related to the sheriff's duties, misappropriation of public funds or property, flagrant or repeated neglect of duties, willful falsification of relevant official statements or documents, and obstructing an investigation into the conduct of the sheriff. Additionally, the board must serve the sheriff with a written statement delineating the alleged grounds for removal and provide the sheriff with a reasonable opportunity to respond. The process for appointing a sheriff would remain the same, and the sheriff's investigative and prosecutorial functions would also be unaffected by this amendment. The supporters of it say that it would expedite the removal of a corrupt sheriff from office, that it grants the board a mechanism to enforce its authority, and it promotes accountability and oversight of the sheriff and the sheriff's department. The opponents of this say that it reallocates the public's power to decide on the sheriff. It reallocates it from the public to the Board of Supervisors. They say that there is a considerable risk of misuse of this for political purposes, and there are concerns that this measure may be expanded to other elected officials than the sheriff. So that's the information that I have on Measure A, which is a charter amendment. I probably can't answer many questions about it, but if you have some, we'll try. Okay, it's pretty straightforward. So the second county measure is a little more complicated. It's a general tax on cannabis business in the unincorporated areas of the county.
Rosemary?
Yes.
I'm sorry, Carol.
Yes, Carol.
I was fighting with a battery that's
Oh,
dying.
okay. Go ahead.
I think and I hope I had to run up and get the charger cord, but I think the important thing about this one, it will not apply to this sheriff.
Correct.
It will not apply. So people who think this is the way to get rid of our current sheriff, they have to think as you very well stated, in the broader terms. What are the implications of this?
Right. It is what could happen in the future.
Right. Thank you.
Thank you, Carol. Measure C is a tax on cannabis businesses in the unincorporated areas of the county. The Board of Supervisors has directed the Office of Cannabis Management to develop a plan to tax cannabis businesses in the unincorporated areas of Los Angeles County. Currently, these businesses are prohibited, but this would enable the county to tax some upcoming businesses. So it would tax both business activity and cultivation. It would tax retail and delivery, manufacturing, distribution, and testing labs. And in the cultivation side, it would tax artificial lighting, mixed lighting, which is a natural and artificial, and nurseries. The tax rates start at, for retail delivery, start at 4% and can go up to 6%. For manufacturing, they start at 3% and could be increased to 4%. For distribution, it's 3%, and testing labs, 1%. On the cultivation side, artificial lighting, the starting rate is $7 per square foot, and with a maximum of $10. Lighting is $4 per square foot with a maximum of $7, and the nurseries $2 per square foot. So if this tax rate becomes effective, is passed, it would become effective in July of 2023, and it just requires a simple majority vote by all of Los Angeles County voters, not just those in unincorporated areas. These tax rates could be adjusted after July 1st, 2026, and beginning in July 2027, they would be adjusted every year for inflation using the Consumer Price Index. The cannabis licensing program will allow for up to 25 storefront retail cannabis businesses, 25 delivery businesses, 10 indoor mixed light cultivation establishments, 10 manufacturing businesses, 10 distribution facilities, and 10 testing laboratories. The outdoor cultivation of cannabis will not be allowed during this initial period. However, the Board of Supervisors could in the future decide to permit it, and in that case, the corresponding tax rate would apply. The projected annual revenue from these proposed taxes is 10.36 million. It would go to the general fund and benefit all of Los Angeles County, not just the unincorporated areas. There would be no tax on individuals that cultivate it for their personal use. Illegal operations would also be subject to these proposed tax rates. And the reason for this is that then they could be prosecuted for tax evasion if they are cultivating this illegally. So those are the pros and cons that information that I have on the cannabis tax. Perhaps some of you know more about it than I do. So are there any questions or comments? Okay. Well, I want to thank you all for your attendance this afternoon, and thank you for your wonderful questions and for your knowledge. Some of you are much more knowledgeable than I am. So thank you again for attending and for your attention.
I want to
That concludes my program.
David has his hand up.
Okay.
for your presentation. It was
Just-
really
just a
outstanding, and I know that if
quick
all of us
question.
were in person instead of in little squares, there would be thunderous applause because it
That's
was
right.
tremendous.
Well, because it's so early in the year, you know, we don't have all of the propositions. We don't have PowerPoints available yet. I did receive a PowerPoint this morning about 11:30, but I didn't even have time to look at it. So the next group I talk to will get a PowerPoint and maybe information on the city. And we'll incorporate some of the knowledge that you shared today.
Nevertheless, thank you so much. It was a wonderful presentation.
Thank you.
My question is, how do we get the league to send out notice to all members when the county and propositions and analyses become available on the county website?
We'll have to ask Fran about that, how that's going to be out, how that's going to be distributed, because I know we all want it as soon as possible.
Would that be on Voter's Edge?
It's not on the county site at all.
Not the city and county ones. They only do the state. So
It's just the county registrar hasn't put them up yet.
right. Okay.